According to official figures, more than tens of millions of people go missing every year around the world. About a third of them are found alive and unharmed. Almost half of them are found after a while dead as a result of accidents or murdered, and about 2 million people disappear without a trace every year. The latter are usually found neither alive nor dead, even after many years. The story of Agnes Cavina made a lot of noise in the fall of 2014, when a young and very attractive woman who was having fun in a club with friends as if vanished into thin air. Everyone who might have been involved seemed to escape any responsibility. However, in 2023, 9 years after the tragedy, the case took a completely unexpected turn. But let's get to the bottom of it. Who is Agnes Cavina? Our today's heroine was born in 1984, July 8th, in the capital of Latvia, the city of Riga. She grew up in an ordinary family and became the youngest of 2 daughters of her parents. Agnes's own sister, Greta, was only a couple of years older than her, so the girls were always very friendly and almost inseparable. The parents did their best to give their daughters a good education and let them realize their dreams. Agnes grew up a sociable, cheerful, and very active girl. She did well at school, played sports, and had a lot of friends. In the future, she dreamed to connect her profession with tourism or entertainment, because she loved to travel and knew how to organize perfect leisure time. In addition, Agnes also had a bright appearance and a spectacular figure, so men always gave her their attention and compliments. The girl from a young age has always had a lot of admirers who in every way to get her attention. After graduating from school, Agnes worked for some time in the service industry while attending language courses and studying to be a tourism manager. At the age of 20, she decided to move from her native Latvia to the foggy Albion and settled in London. She believed that here she would have more prospects and opportunities to unlock all her potential and talents. Parents and older sister did not oppose her decision and sincerely supported. Soon after the move, the beautiful blonde met a young man whose name was Michael Mills. He was older than Agnes by 8 years, had a good education, owned his own thriving business, opened a small movie theater and entertainment complex, and was considered a very successful man. He and Agnes quickly found a common language and soon began dating. Michael wooed Agnes beautifully, gave expensive gifts. Together they traveled and made far-reaching plans for their future together. The couple was truly in love and happy. It seemed that a long and prosperous life awaited them. According to the memories of those close to Agnes, this was her first true love. She seemed to glow at the sight of her chosen one and dreamed of becoming his lawful wife soon. In 2014, Clavina was offered a 3-month labor contract as an administrator in one of the largest and most popular nightclubs in the Spanish resort town of Marbella. Naturally, this job implied a temporary move to another country, but the ambitious and purposeful young woman did not want to miss this opportunity at all. Michael could not give up everything and go to Spain with his beloved because of his job, but he was not against her signing the contract. For Agnes, it was a great opportunity to try herself in a new field of activity, to gain invaluable experience, and perhaps further move and develop in this direction. It should be noted that Marbella is one of the most famous and attractive resorts on the Mediterranean coast. Here come vacationers from different parts of the world, mostly wealthy people who go to have fun and spend money. Here you can often meet show business stars, as well as famous athletes and businessmen. Clavina, who has always been very sociable, liked working in such a place. Before moving, she visited her family in Latvia and told them that she had signed a favorable employment contract for 3 months. She also shared another piece of good news. After returning to England, she and Michael were planning to get married. Dad, Mom, and sister were genuinely happy for Agnes and wished her luck. At the end of May 2014, Agnes, having packed only the most necessary things for one season, went to work in sunny Spain. Her lover stayed in London, but they called each other daily and communicated via video link, telling each other about everything that was happening to them. Clavina actively maintained her pages in various popular social networks, where she posted daily photos, small videos, and stories. She got a lot of followers who closely followed her activities and work. It was obvious that Agnes lived an interesting, busy life and enjoyed every day. After the end of her employment contract, Agnes decided to stay in Spain for a couple more months. It was the beginning of the velvet season in the resort, and during this period it was possible to earn good money. She consulted her boyfriend, and he supported her and promised to visit her for a few days because they had not seen each other for a long time and missed each other very much. Agnes almost immediately got a job as a hostess in a high-end restaurant and renewed her lease. In September, as expected, Michael visited her. They were having fun, planning the upcoming wedding and choosing a place to go on honeymoon. Less than a week later, the young man returned back to London, and Agnes had to work in Spain for another month, after which she was going to visit her relatives in Latvia and then fly to England to her lover. But these plans, alas, were not destined to come true. On September 6th, Agnes, in the company of her friends, went to one of the popular nightclubs in the region, the Costa del Sol. A few hours before, she had called her fiancé, who was aware of her plans and did not object to Agnes having fun with her friends. The young people enjoyed themselves and took pictures together, and Agnes posted several of them on her online profile that night. According to the memories of those who saw her that fatal night, the bright blonde was wearing a spectacular short dress and carrying a tiny white clutch handbag. Toward morning, when the friends were about to go home, Agnes said she planned to stay a little longer and then take a cab. She was always quite serious and responsible, and Agnes had not had much to drink, so her companions saw no reason to worry. At that moment, when the friends said goodbye and headed for the exit, Klavina was talking to a man who had bought her a cocktail and was clearly trying to win Agnes's favor. After that night, Klavina was never seen again, alive or dead. It seemed as if she had simply vanished into the crowded nightclub. No one could remember what time and with whom the blonde left the establishment or where she had gone afterwards. The next day, Agnes did not show up at work, and when trying to contact her, it turned out that her phone was switched off. Colleagues and friends were the first to raise the alarm, but the police were slow to respond to their missing persons report. Toward evening, a worried Michael called Agnes's mother and said that he had been unable to contact his fiancée all day, which had never happened before. The next day, Agnes's parents and fiancé jointly tried to contact the Spanish police to report the disappearance. However, they were told that the relatives had to file such a report in person, otherwise it would not be considered. After these words, Michael and Clavin's family took the next flight to Marbella. In the end, the missing persons report was filed by the family only 5 days after Agnes had disappeared without a trace. The first thing that was checked was the apartment Agnes had rented, but it looked as if the owner had gone out for a while and would be back soon. Documents, money, and a few expensive pieces of jewelry were in their places. The refrigerator was stocked with prepared food, and on the bed were several outfits from which Agnes had chosen what to wear to the club on her last night. It was obvious that Klavina had not been in her apartment since the day she had gone out with her friends. Her phone had been turned off, she had left no more posts on social media, and she had not responded to any messages. It was only then that the police began investigating the disappearance, but precious time was irretrievably lost. Agnes's friends and family began to post flyers all over the city with her picture and requests for help in the search. The story was also picked up by the media, featured on television news programs, and Agnes's pictures were on the front pages of local newspapers. The first leads and clues emerged after the police studied the footage from the CCTV cameras located inside and outside the entertainment venue. However, there were also some problems with this, because all the files had already been erased by that time, and the police had to ask for help from specialists in order to restore them. But the efforts were not in vain, and on one of the recordings, made by a camera located at the exit to the parking lot, it was seen how Agnes, around 6 o'clock in the morning, leaves the club with a man, and does it clearly not of her own free will. This last footage, which showed Klavina alive, was to be studied in detail, but the closer the experts looked at them, the more frightening they seemed. Agnes was being led by a man of large build, and it was obvious that she was walking with him under compulsion because he was holding her tightly by the waist. Agnes looked frightened, tried to break free several times and said something emotionally, but her companion persistently led her to the parking lot, where he literally forced her into his Mercedes A63 with tinted windows. At the moment when the big man was pushing her into the cabin, it was visible that another man was already inside. While the first man was heading for the driver's seat, Agnes managed to open the car door, after which she tried to get out and escape. But at that moment, the doorman who was standing next to her came up, and the driver gestured and said something. The doorman pushed Agnes back into the car, after which the driver handed him something, apparently a cash reward for his help. About 6 minutes after Agnes was in the car, her phone was switched off and was never switched on again. It was also impossible to trace the further movement of the vehicle because there were no CCTV cameras along the way. It became obvious that the men who were in the cabin were the last to contact the missing beauty. Surprisingly, the case was given a high level of secrecy from the start. Everyone involved in the investigation signed non-disclosure documents, and information was not only kept out of the press, but even Agnes's loved ones were hardly ever given any information. For the first few months, parents and fiancé were kept in the dark. They were only told that the investigation was underway and that it was too early to draw any conclusions. But judging by the fact that Agnes had not given any information about herself during this time, there was little hope that she was still alive. Michael periodically gave interviews in which he asked for help in finding his fiancée, but no one ever responded to his requests. Only 6 months later, the relatives were shown the very footage from the club cameras, as well as the names of all 3 men who had last contacted Agnes. The large man who had forcibly taken the young woman out of the club and pushed her into the car was identified as Wesley Capper, the son of a well-known British millionaire and a very powerful man. In the passenger compartment of the car sat his longtime buddy named Craig Porter, who had no particular occupation and was periodically on the police's radar. The third was a dark-skinned doorman whose name was Sian Usman. Porter and Usman stated unanimously under interrogation that they were innocent, that Agnes had gotten into the car voluntarily. According to Capper, he and a friend spotted the beautiful blonde in a club and approached her to get acquainted. She was allegedly already pretty drunk, which contradicts the testimony of her friends, but didn't refuse a drink when they bought her a drink. Wesley then proposed to continue the party at his luxurious house in the country, to which Agnes agreed. Already in the car, Agnes allegedly changed her mind about going to the private party at Wesley's house and asked to be dropped off in the middle of the road, saying she would take a cab and go to her home. The man claimed to have dropped the passenger off where she asked, which was an unlit stretch of road that soon turned out to have no CCTV cameras either. But Craig Porter could neither confirm nor deny the words of Wesley Capper, because he himself, according to his confession, was also very drunk and did not even understand when and how Agnes was in their car. Moreover, he stated that he fell asleep as soon as they drove away from the parking lot, and when he woke up, the young woman was no longer in the cabin. The third suspect, the doorman Sian Usman, also said that Agnes Clavina was drunk, but could not answer the question whether she had gotten into the car voluntarily. He did, however, confirm that when the car touched down, the blonde opened the door and almost fell out as she was driving. Then the doorman, at the request of the driver, slammed the door, for which he received a substantial tip. When Sian Usman was asked whether he thought it was strange that the woman had tried to escape by jumping out of the car while walking, he said he didn't think it was an escape attempt. In his opinion, she could have accidentally opened the door because she was intoxicated. He also added that Agnes did not scream or ask for help. The footage clearly showed Wesley Capper forcefully leading Agnes to the car, holding her by the waist and wrist. Wesley's defense was that Agnes was dizzy and he was holding her down so that she would not fall. Sometime later, the investigation came across another curious but also strange and frightening video, which was made in Soto Grande in the south of Spain, in the port of Puerto de la Duquesa. The luxury yacht of John Capper, a millionaire who was the father of one of the suspects, was moored there. The footage, dated September 10th, 4 days after Agnes's disappearance, shows Wesley, Craig, and 2 other men boarding the yacht. They were carrying a large suitcase which, judging from the footage, was quite weighty, as well as a rolled-up carpet. When the company returned to the port of Puerto de la Duquesa a few days later, they had no luggage with them. After the footage was shown to Capper, He claimed that he and his friends had sailed to Ibiza to have fun. The suitcase, he said, contained their belongings, and what the investigation mistook for a carpet was bedding. Where it all subsequently went, he could not explain. A thorough search of Wesley's yacht and automobile yielded no results. As it turned out, both had been cleaned and dry cleaned, destroying any traces of DNA. However, a long blonde hair was found in the trunk of the car, but it was not possible to establish its origin because this crucial evidence mysteriously evaporated during the investigation. At the trial, the prosecution told another curious detail. As it turned out, a few hours after Agnes was in the defendant's car, Capper called the emergency services several times, but each time he dropped the call without waiting for an answer, as if he was afraid or doubted the correctness of his actions. The man himself explained that he was drunk and made the calls randomly. The lawyer for the Klavin family stated that Agnes, in his opinion, was long dead, and that her body was resting somewhere on the seabed in the very suitcase that the suspects had brought aboard the yacht. In addition, he believed that the case was deliberately delayed, and the criminals had plenty of time to get rid of all the evidence that could prove their guilt. Only a year and a half after Agnes's disappearance, Capper, Porter, and Usman found themselves in the dock. They were accused of holding Agnes against her will and forcing her into a car. Unfortunately, due to the lack of evidence, there was nothing more to charge them with. Moreover, the millionaire and his friend were released on bail and quietly left the courtroom. Naturally, Agnes's relatives were outraged by this, but the judge was adamant. All three men were only brought to trial again in 2019, almost 5 years after Agnes's disappearance. They still denied their guilt and insisted that Klavina had gotten into the car of her own free will. The prosecutor asked that the doorman be considered an accomplice to the crime because he helped the defendants drive the victim away. Usman could have received a sentence of 5 years in prison for his actions. In response, he made a fiery speech in which he said that he was among the suspects because of the color of his skin, as well as the lack of opportunity to hire a good lawyer, because all the money he earns, he sends to a starving family in Africa. Capper and Porter's lawyers insisted that their clients were guilty only of persuading Agnes to get into the car, but not of forcing her to do so. In their opinion, the young woman was dropped off on the road as she had requested, but while she was waiting for a cab to go home, she could have been kidnapped and killed by third parties because Agnes was drunk and could not offer much resistance. The verdict of the judge surprised and angered the relatives of the missing young woman because none of the defendants, in fact, was not punished at all. Usman was cleared of all charges. Capper was sentenced to 2 years for taking advantage of Agnes's drunken state to persuade her to get into his car, and Porter received 6 months for complicity. In reality, the men received suspended sentences and did not spend a single day in prison, but paid Agnes's family the ridiculous sum of £10,000 sterling in compensation. Klavin's family were discouraged by the decision and appealed. And then it turned out that both defendants in the case, while waiting for the court's decision, managed to break the law once again. Capper, being in a state of alcoholic and drug intoxication, knocked down a woman to death and fled the scene, and Porter and his friend, also drunk, stole a car, having previously beaten its owner to a pulp. But even for this serious crime, Capper was sentenced only to probation thanks to the brilliantly built defense of his lawyers. He paid a large sum in compensation to the family of the woman killed under the wheels of his car, and he himself remained at large. Porter was less fortunate this time, and he still went to jail, but there is no information in public sources about the sentence he received. In 2021, almost 7 years after Agnes's disappearance, the main suspect in the case was punished. Wesley had been living an immoral lifestyle all this time, abusing alcohol and illicit substances, which had severely compromised his health. At the height of the COVID pandemic, he found himself in a hospital bed, and when he thought he had conquered the disease, he suddenly had a stroke. Capper died on July 26, 2021, in his 44th year of life. At that time, Agnes's parents filed another appeal with the court. But now the suspect can no longer be prosecuted because he is dead, no matter what the Supreme Court decides in this difficult case. An unexpected twist 9 years later. Although Agnes Clavina was never found dead or alive, she was still presumed dead sometime later. Her parents, sister and fiancé, agreed with the lawyer's version that the criminals had placed Agnes's body in a suitcase, which was subsequently loaded onto a yacht and dumped somewhere on the high seas so that it could not be found. However, in the summer of 2023, 9 years after Agnes disappeared without a trace, the case took an unexpected turn. So, in mid-June, a gardener of one of the elite golf clubs, La Quita, located in the Costa del Sol region cleaning the area, found a strange object near the coast, which upon closer inspection turned out to be an old, badly damaged suitcase. The man did not dare to open it himself and called the police. Inside the suitcase, law enforcers found human remains. The examination showed that the bones found belonged to a young woman whose approximate age at the time of death was 35 years old. In addition, it was also found that the suitcase with the body inside had spent about 10 years in the water before it was brought to the shore. After comparing all the facts, the police hypothesized that the body found belonged to Agnes Cavina, who disappeared 9 years ago. In order to establish this unequivocally, a number of examinations are required to compare Agnes's DNA with the remains found. At the moment, experts are working closely on this issue, but the details of the investigation have not yet been made public. If the suspicions are confirmed, it will be a reason to reopen the case and bring the surviving suspects to trial.
In the spring of 2016, in the quiet town of Fort Worth, located in the state of Texas, there was a brutal and cynical murder that shocked even the most experienced investigators. The victim of the crime was a young mother of many children named Elizabeth Paula Arlano, who worked as a paramedic, and you will be shocked to learn who was her executioner. The circumstances of the tragedy were so strange that at first the police even put forward the theory that Elizabeth may have voluntarily passed away. However, such a theory did not fit with the testimony of people who became accidental witnesses of the terrible scene. The investigation had to do a lot of hard work to understand everything and send the criminal to the dock. However, given the brutality of the crime he committed, the sentence handed down seemed too lenient and unfair to many. Elizabeth Paula Arlano was born in 1987, August 16th, in the American city of Fort Worth, Texas, where she was destined to live all her short life. She grew up with her two sisters, Alessandra and Giovanna, with whom she was always practically inseparable. Elizabeth's birth father left the family when she was very young. He showed no interest in the fate of his daughter and did not contact her in any way. Soon her mother, Juanita, remarried to a man named Fidel, who adopted her children and treated them as his own. Elizabeth had a very warm relationship with her stepfather, who supported and helped her in everything. The girl studied diligently at school and dreamed of one day becoming a doctor. In high school, she met a guy named Rudolph Arlano, with whom she soon had a romantic relationship. The young man was almost 8 years older than her, which somewhat embarrassed Elizabeth's parents, but they did not interfere with their romance, because the chosen daughter seemed to them a man serious and quite reliable. At the age of 16 years, barely out of school, Elizabeth married her lover legally. The couple, one after another, had 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter. But despite the appearance of numerous heirs, Elizabeth did not intend to become a housewife. She remembered her childhood dream, so Elizabeth graduated from medical school and got a job as a paramedic, planning to get a higher education to become a doctor. The young woman was kind and pious, brought up in Christian traditions. She regularly took her children to church, instilling in them love and compassion for their neighbors. Family and friends characterized her as a very responsive person, always ready to help. From the outside, their marriage with Rudolph seemed strong and happy. But after 13 years of living together, this union began to literally crack at the seams. Rudolph had been jealous of his young wife before, trying to control her in everything, but over time his behavior became simply unbearable. In the spring of 2016, Elizabeth, after another jealousy scene organized by her husband, took the children and moved to the house of her parents. Rudolph made an attempt to reconcile with his wife, but the young woman was tired of tolerating his fits of anger. In addition, she did not want the children almost every day to listen to the parents' scandals. so she gathered her courage and officially filed for divorce. A few days after Elizabeth took the children and filed for divorce, she mysteriously disappeared. According to friends and family, she was in good spirits, and in order to distract herself from family problems and a little divorce, decided after work to go with colleagues to a local club. So, on Friday evening, April 15, 2016, the 28-year-old young mother in the company of her friends went to a fun place. There she danced and had a good time, but did not touch alcohol because she planned to get home in her own car, on which she arrived at the club. Elizabeth returned home well past midnight on April 16th. Having parked the car, she called her friend, with whom she had vacationed at the club that night, and told her that she had already reached home and that she was all right. Elizabeth then hung up the phone, but never entered the house. The next morning, her mother Juanita was very worried when she found her daughter was not home. She knew that Elizabeth was planning to spend the evening with friends, but her daughter should have returned long ago. She couldn't leave somewhere unannounced, and besides, her car was parked outside the house, which meant that Elizabeth had returned from the club. When Juanita approached the car, it turned out that it was not locked. The key was still sticking in the ignition, and inside on the seat were her daughter's purse and cell phone. Naturally, she couldn't leave her personal belongings in the open car like that, which meant that something terrible had happened. The woman immediately called the police, reporting a missing person. The police believed that they would be able to solve the case, as they call it, on hot tracks. In addition, there was still hope that Elizabeth was alive, because there was no blood or signs of struggle in the car. But it wasn't that simple. The first thing was to reconstruct in the smallest detail the chronology of the events of that evening and night, to trace Elizabeth's entire route, to find and question all possible witnesses. First, friends and colleagues of the young woman with whom she had spent the evening before her disappearance were interviewed. They gave the exact time when she went home, and later Elizabeth herself called back, saying that she had reached the place safely. In addition, several calls and messages from her ex-husband Rudolph Arlano, who had persistently tried to contact her that night, were found in the missing person's cell phone, but Elizabeth never answered him. Police officers went to Rudolph's house to find out where he was and what he was doing the previous evening and night. According to the man, he had been in contact with his ex-spouse just the night before, and she had promised that she would bring the children to him for the weekend. But afterward, she stopped answering the phone, and he thought she had changed her mind. As for an alibi, Arlano's alibi was questionable. According to him, he sat with a friend at a local bar that evening, and around midnight he returned to his home and went to bed. His friend and several other people who had been relaxing at the same establishment on Friday confirmed that Rudolph was indeed there, but where he went afterward, no one could say for sure. The man assured that he had gone home, but as he now lived alone, there was no one to confirm this. Thus, the police were not going to exclude Mr. Arlano from the list of suspects. Besides, he didn't seem upset or worried. It was clear that he and Elizabeth were in the process of divorce, but they had been married for many years. She was the mother of his children, and it was strange that her disappearance had not affected him in any way. On the night of the disappearance of a young mother, a fisherman called the emergency services to report a strange incident he had witnessed. The man said that he was sitting alone with a fishing rod on a bridge, which is part of an interstate highway, when about 4:30 o'clock in the morning, he noticed a car drive onto the bridge, stop, and then the driver pulled out something large that looked like a person and threw it into the water. It also appeared to him that something bulky and obviously heavy was tied to this person. Since the fisherman was at a great distance and it was still dark, he could not see details, nor could he see the make and number of the car. In addition, there was a strong wind on the bridge, so the man could not hear anything. Soon, another witness was found walking at night with his dog down by the bridge. He did not see what was happening on the bridge itself, but a heartbreaking scream caught his attention. Then he saw something large flying down from the bridge, followed by a splash, and then silence. Based on the testimony of witnesses, the police decided to examine the bottom of the pond near the bridge. A few hours later, divers came across a body with a massive piece of concrete tied to its neck with a rope. The drowned woman turned out to be the missing Elizabeth Arlano. Had it not been for the testimony of a passerby and a fisherman, her body would probably have been discovered very soon or not found at all, because the tide weight did not allow the body to float. Then a version was put forward that the young woman decided to leave her life voluntarily against the background of problems in the family. But this assumption was untenable because it did not fit with the testimony of a witness who saw how someone threw her into the water, nor with the words of relatives who assured that Elizabeth made great plans for life and would never do this to her children and parents. Elizabeth was still alive when a piece of concrete was tied to her neck and thrown off the bridge. This was evidenced by the forensic medical results, which showed that the young woman had suffocated, and by the testimony of a man who heard her desperate scream as she flew down the bridge. But who and for what reason could have so brutally massacred a mother of many children? Robbery was not considered because none of Elizabeth's belongings were taken. There were suggestions that the killer could have spotted Elizabeth in the club and then followed her home, or someone guarded her at home, waiting for her to return. The ex-husband of the deceased continued to insist that he was sleeping at his home on the night of the murder and had nothing to do with the crime. However, the investigators were still in no hurry to exclude Rudolph from the number of suspects because he had no alibi, and his behavior raised more and more questions. At the funeral, the man put on an act. He wept at the coffin of his ex-wife, saying that he would like to be in her place or die with her. According to his sister Elizabeth, she even believed in the sincerity of his words. In addition, Rudolph actively helped in the creation of a charitable foundation to raise funds for the ceremony of farewell to his wife. But after the funeral, when the man was once again called to testify, he already looked and behaved completely different, as if nothing bad had happened in his life. After a detailed examination of all the CCTV footage from the last route Elizabeth took, it was determined that a car of the same make and color as Rudolph's had driven away from her parents' house around 3 a.m. The neighbor also recalled seeing the car parked on the road near the deceased's house. Their neighbor also recalled seeing the car parked on the road not far from the deceased's house. Moreover, it was established that the car had subsequently driven towards the very bridge from which the woman had been thrown. This circumstance raised many questions, and when the investigation requested Rudolph's cell phone data on the night of the crime, the questions became even more. It turned out that the man made several calls that night, first near Elizabeth's place of work, and then near the home of his mother-in-law and father-in-law. He also sent his ex-wife several messages trying to find out when she would return, but his messages went unanswered. Apparently, he had been following her and eventually decided to wait for her return at Elizabeth's parents' house. The police finally had enough evidence to arrest Rudolph as the prime suspect and bring him to the station for further questioning. One of the key witnesses in the case was Elizabeth and Rudolph's eldest son. When the boy was shown the rope removed from his mother's neck, the son stated that he had seen it earlier in the backyard of his father's house and remembered it well because he had played with it. Moreover, the boy also recognized a piece of concrete that had been lying in their garden shortly before after the fence had been replaced. Also, small fragments of this concrete were found in the trunk of the car belonging to Rudolph. The investigation found that the man waited for his ex-wife at her parents' home and abducted her before she could enter the house. He forced her into his car, in the trunk of which he had already prepared rope and concrete. Afterward, he drove to the bridge for the massacre, expecting to go unnoticed. Rudolph Arlano was taken into custody 10 days after his ex-wife's body was recovered from the lake. Despite a large amount of evidence and witness testimony proving his guilt, Rudolph denied any involvement in the crime and continued to insist that he was at home that night. Given the brutality of his actions, Rudolph was facing the ultimate penalty of death. And then, on the advice of his lawyer, he decided to confess to everything and cooperate with the investigation to mitigate the sentence. It wasn't until January 2019 that Arlano pleaded guilty in court and detailed how he kidnapped and murdered his ex-wife and the mother of their 4 children. Juanita, who was in the courtroom listening to his story, fainted, and Alessandra and Giovanna called their sister's killer a monster. Rudolph himself, though he admitted his guilt, felt no remorse or pangs of conscience. He spoke indifferently and coldly about his murder, did not apologize, and did not explain the motive for his terrible act. The court sentenced the murderer to life in prison without parole. Elizabeth's family members, although they considered such a sentence rather mild, but noted that they forgive Rudolph because they do not want their hearts to boil with hatred. Her parents and sisters are now responsible for the upbringing of the deceased woman's children.
If Dave Krupa had known how his online dating would turn out, he would never have registered on a dating site. He would have continued to live his old life, with his girlfriend Amy Flora and their 2 children together. Maybe finally, he would have legalized the 12-year relationship after all. Especially since after the breakup, Amy and Dave remained good friends. Periodically, they spent vacations together with their children, fulfilling their parenting duties to perfection. That was in 2011, and by the summer of 2012, Dave was ready to start a new relationship. Only the man was not looking for any commitment, preferring to remain single. He wanted to get acquainted with women who would not mind a free relationship and did not make far-reaching plans. With such thoughts, he came to the dating site, a place where everyone is looking for something different. The modern world has brought with it new technologies that allow you to build communication at a distance, bypassing many nuances, the awkwardness of the first acquaintance, the appearance at the same time, the fear of being rejected. Now, to get acquainted with someone who is interesting to you, it has become simple. It is enough only to choose the intended partner by a set of characteristics specified by him in the questionnaire. Even leave the house for this unnecessary. However, who is hiding behind a cute avatar profile, it is not known, and whether he corresponds to those features that describe too. And the real goals of dating are not always voiced in advance and found out at later stages of the relationship. Carrie Farver was born on November 30th, 1974 in Macedonia, Nebraska, USA. Having a failed experience of previous relationships, she alone raised her son, Maxwell. At one time, the child was a reward as well as a challenge for her. Despite her great love for the baby, she once spent a month in bed, going into a deep depression. The child's care was provided by Carrie's mother, Nancy Rainey. Difficult relations with the father of the child, unsettled living conditions, served as a reason for the appearance of a young 20-year-old woman such an acute psychological state. Doctors later diagnosed Farver with bipolar disorder. People with this diagnosis are like 2 sides of the same coin. The person falls into extremes. His mood becomes either too good or too bad. Euphoria, increased efficiency, extreme friendliness is replaced by a depressed state, bitterness, impotence, and so on. The disease greatly complicates the normal life of a person, but in the early 2000s, Carrie's doctor was able to find such an effective treatment for her, after which she was able to live like other people. Whether she wanted to settle her personal life is a rhetorical question. On the one hand, absolutely. What woman does not dream of a worthy companion? On the other hand, why tie yourself to someone who may later become the cause of many worries and misfortunes? Carrie grew up in a full loving family, had an active life position, engaged in sports, dreamed of devoting herself to medicine. However, dreams were not allowed to materialize. At the first practice in the medical college, where the girl entered, she lost consciousness at the sight of blood. Therefore, deciding not to risk neither her health nor the health of patients, she studied to become a programmer. In the fall of 2012 in the neighboring city of Omaha, Carrie was offered a job on good terms. She couldn't turn down the prospects that lay ahead of her, so she accepted the offer. Since Max was in middle school, the boy did not want to change his familiar surroundings and move with his mother. He remained to reside with his grandmother in Macedonia. Carrie Farver's friend, Amy Long, recalled that she couldn't help but be noticed. When she walked into a room, all eyes were on her and her radiant smile. Perhaps that's what Dave Krupa liked about her one November day in 2012. Carrie met Dave at the auto repair shop where he worked. While looking at Carrie's car, a Ford Explorer, he realized he was very attractive to this woman. She's showing me something inside the car, and we're standing there and we're very close. And there was some tension, Dave later recalled. It didn't take long for the date to arrive, and it was afterward that they went up to Dave's house. Except that their privacy was marred by many calls and messages from a certain Liz, who later stopped by the man's apartment to pick up something left for her earlier. Dave explained to Carrie that this was his former companion Liz Golar, whom he met on a dating site about 6 months ago and had been dating for a while. He also explained that the woman was extremely clingy, which was the reason for their breakup. Carrie was very understanding, so she wasn't confused when she saw another woman in the man's apartment. After all, everyone has their own handleless suitcase from the past that occasionally makes itself known. So Carrie remained unfazed, but Liz was clearly upset to see a strange woman in Dave's house. 2 weeks after moving in, Carrie began dating Dave. They had discussed their relationship with each other beforehand, agreeing only to a brief, unencumbered affair. Shanna, Elizabeth Golar, better known as Liz, was the first person Dave met online in 2012. Liz was born in 1975 in Michigan. Dave liked her at first. She claimed that she was also not looking for a serious relationship, especially since she was a mother, and most of her time should be spent on her children, not men. By the way, they both had children around the same age. Dave repeatedly noted that Liz was unlikely to be a real-life partner for him, since she was neither well-read nor educated, which was important in a relationship between a man and a woman. They had few topics of conversation, and the relationship emphasized more on the horizontal. Over time, Liz became interested in what Dave was doing in her absence, who he was seeing, to which the man repeatedly pointed out that they were in an open relationship and she shouldn't care. Dave also told her that she could behave as she wished, that he did not restrict her from dating other men. However, apparently Liz was not satisfied with this, and she began to pester Dave more and more. But most of all, Liz was jealous of Dave's children and their mother Amy. She couldn't understand the warm relationship that remained between them after the breakup. Eventually, Liz's actions forced Dave to distance himself. Then Carrie appeared on the horizon. Carrie was beautiful, with style and intelligence. Dave could talk to her for hours. They matched on everything. "I felt like I hit the jackpot," Dave claimed. Liz, sensing that the man was pulling away from her more and more, began to remind him of himself with more activity. She wrote messages, emails, and called. However, he wasn't going to stop seeing Carrie or anyone else for her. Soon, Carrie and Dave were spending more and more nights together. Dave allowed himself to do this because it was convenient for Carrie to get to work, and he enjoyed her company. Carrie acted like she was not looking for something serious, but was just enjoying the moment, having fun. In December 2015, Liz was shot. The woman, in all likelihood, guessed who it was. As luck would have it, the wound turned out to be non-fatal. "This can't go on any longer. I have to do something about it," thought Liz. Leaving for work on November 13th, 2012, Carrie kissed Dave and promised to see him later. That was the last time he would see her. At 9:45 a.m. while at work, Dave was very surprised by the contents of a text message from Carrie. She texted him that she wanted to live with him and move in with him permanently. The correspondence was very disconcerting to Krupp. He could not understand Farver's sudden change of mood, as they had discussed this point beforehand. They had jointly decided that they would not rush into a relationship. They were happy as they were now. The message, however, told a different story. Dave gently replied that he wasn't ready for such a change. The counter-message from Carrie was not pleasant. "Lots of profanity," he described the message. "I didn't know what to think. I was shocked." When he returned to the apartment, he found that all of Carrie's belongings that she had brought to him were gone. Apparently, that's why he thought the woman had left him. That same day, Carrie deleted him from her Facebook friends. That would seem to be the end of it. But no. Dave started receiving text messages and emails from Carrie several times a day. They contained curses and threats to ruin his life. There were so many of them, and they were all rude. Carrie also didn't show up for work, which was unlike her, since she was notable for her punctuality. Strange messages from Carrie Farver were sent not only to Dave Krupa, but also to her mother and her 15-year-old son. She wrote that she had found a job in Kansas and planned to take Max. But for now, she wants to be alone as she is worried about her failed romance. In May 2013, Carrie in her Facebook profile published a rather long post, which read, "I've answered enough questions to prove to everyone that I've had enough. You can either believe I'm your daughter, mother, sister, and friend you've known your whole life, or just leave me alone. I left of my own free will, and I'm sick of everyone giving me a hard time for doing what I had to do. I don't miss it, I just don't want to go home right now. I'm a grown woman, and if I feel like leaving home, I have the right to do so. So when I'm ready to come home, I will. I'm sorry that after hurting everyone, I just up and left. Time passed, however. Carrie never showed up. The woman's mother clearly realized something was wrong with her daughter when she missed her own birthday, as well as Max's birthday and other family celebrations. The final straw was her father's funeral. After a while, Liz Goler also started receiving messages from Carrie. In them, she insulted and humiliated the woman, and some messages contained a threat to stay away from Dave. In order for the man to be able to explain such strange behavior of her friend, Liz decided to contact him. He told her that he was in exactly the same situation. Carrie attacked him with messages and emails. In them, the woman accused her former lover of all sins, called him a lecher, and promised revenge for all the pain he had caused her with his response. Sometimes the messages were ominous in nature, telling her what Dave was up to at the moment. The fact that they were in the same position brought Dave and Liz even closer together. He felt even more guilty for the inconvenience he had caused her. Soon, the incessant messages from Carrie became more threatening. The text was illogical and full of grammatical errors. Carrie's mother insisted that her daughter had never been an angry person and that she had always written letters and other documents correctly. Carrie was meticulous about spelling and style. Did Carrie's bipolar disorder develop into something more after a second trigger? Could it be that she had experienced even greater mental abnormalities? There was no explanation for Carrie's actions other than her uncontrolled mental state. The main sign of dissociative identity disorder, split personality, is the existence of a separate self-consciousness in each ego. At the same time, each of them has a different memory, thinking, behavior, and even inclinations to certain actions. Could this explain Carrie's strange behavior and even her altered writing style? Everything pointed to the woman's instability. That's why the police didn't consider Carrie Farver missing. Focused on stopping the pursuit of Liz and Dave, they tried to track Carrie through her cell phone. But it was all in vain. The signals were being blocked. Liz and Dave were still receiving hundreds of texts and emails. Sometimes, even when they were together, their phones would receive nasty messages at the same time. The couple continued to date, but Dave felt uncomfortable around Liz. She became more demanding again, although she continued to claim that she was fine with their no-commitment relationship. Every time Dave fought with Liz and ended his relationship with her, Carrie increasingly texted, "We were both victimized. Dave and I had something in common that we didn't have with anyone else," says Liz. Common problems brought the young people closer together, and they returned to each other again and again. In January 2013, Dave discovered the missing Carrie's car in his front yard. Surprisingly, the fingerprints on the steering wheel did not belong to Carrie, and in general, the car was clean. No suspicious traces were found in it. The police later turned the car over to Farver's parents. Carrie continued to write to Liz and Dave. It got to the point where she started sending pictures of their children and threatening to hurt them if Dave didn't leave Liz alone. Time passed, but there were no results. Carrie's manic stalking continued, and Liz annoyed Dave more and more with her jealousy as he continued to socialize with other women. He grew tired of what was going on in his life and finally found the strength to finally end his relationship with Liz. Soon after, another tragedy occurred. In August 2013, Liz Goler reported a fire in her home that killed all of her pets, including a snake, a cat, and 2 dogs. Liz told police she suspected Carrie was responsible for what happened. The woman had threatened her repeatedly in her texts and emails. The incident marked a turning point in the case of the missing Carrie. Carrie Farver was put on a federal wanted list, and each of the tens of thousands of messages was decided to be studied in detail. Law enforcement seized cell phones from Dave and Liz. Krupa believed he was in danger too, so he bought a gun for protection. There was a reason for that. Someone vandalized the auto repair shop where he worked and threw a brick through his window. Carrie seemed to direct his anger at anyone in Dave's life. After a while, the mother of his children, Amy Flora, also began receiving threatening messages from Carrie. Since the man often spent time with his children, He often saw Amy as well. Police became suspicious. Why would a man who had dated Dave for less than 2 weeks for 3 years now stalk him and his ex-girlfriends? It just didn't make any sense. Carrie Farver's relatives were also relentless, searching for the missing woman, plugging in every way they could to find her. And one day, in the spring of 2015, the efforts paid off. Detectives Ryan Avis and Jim Doty volunteered to solve Carrie Farver's disappearance. They found no evidence that Carrie was alive. Here's what one of them told ABC News. "It's not normal for adults to just pick up and leave without literally spending any money. No one saw her and no one heard her voice. It just doesn't make sense. She had a good income, a nice house. I've come to the conclusion that I can't prove that she's actually alive." With the help of Anthony Kawa, digital forensics administrator for the Potawatomi County Sheriff's Office, detectives reviewed content downloaded from Krupp and Golar's phones in 2013. Kawa said Carrie Farver sent more than 50,000 texts and 15,000 emails to Dave over a 3-year period. Kawa added, "Whoever was impersonating Carrie, that certain someone became more and more sophisticated in what they were doing, trying to hide their IP address, trying to hide their real identity. Somebody obviously knew what they were doing, knew all kinds of computer programs, at least had access to them." In December 2015, Liz Golar contacted the police again. She reported that she had been shot in the leg on the doorstep of her own home. According to her, it was not Carrie, but Amy Flora. She was the one she recognized as her attacker. Dave was also missing a gun that Amy may have had access to. Could this woman be behind Carrie's disappearance? There was a lead in the investigation. It explained why everyone connected to Dave Krupp was being harassed. It could well be that Amy, having failed to settle her personal life after the breakup with the father of her children, decided to take revenge in this way and eliminate all competitors. Especially since the relationship between Dave and Amy has always been not bad, the joint children brought them closer together, and foreign women clearly prevented them from getting back together. It didn't take long for the police to respond. Amy was questioned. However, to everyone's surprise, she had an alibi. She had not been at Liz's house at the time of the shooting. This was confirmed by several people, so no arrest was made. The investigation became more and more confusing. At the same time, new details became known from the specialists who were processing data from Liz's cell phone. Golar's phone contained a wealth of information. Kava discovered fake email addresses with different variations of Farver's name. Investigators also discovered an app she used to schedule messages to be sent at certain times. This could explain how she and Dave were receiving messages from Carrie at the same time. Kava became suspicious of Liz Golar. The puzzle came together when Liz's fingerprints were compared to those found on the steering wheel of Carrie's car. They were a perfect match. It became obvious who the culprit was. The killer had been around all these years, and there was no telling who else might have been affected by her actions. One thing was clear. The case had to be stopped as soon as possible. The only thing left to do was not to scare Liz away, or better yet, catch her red-handed. Something had to be done to throw the woman off balance. The detectives decided to make up a story about supposedly believing Liz, with Amy still being the prime suspect. Liz took the bait. She was overjoyed that she would finally be able to get rid of another rival that was interfering with her happiness with Dave. Shortly afterward, Liz Golar handed the police an email that she claimed was from Amy. In that email, Amy admitted to kidnapping Carrie. It also contained details of the crime. The confession stated that Carrie had been stabbed earlier in the stomach or chest area and then disposed of the body. Details from the letter also contained information about Carrie's car and home, which were not made public. The details were chilling because they were graphic, an investigative spokeswoman said. Liz provided detectives with the kind of information that only a true criminal could possess. Thus, she inadvertently confessed to the murder of Carrie Farver. It was clear from the letter that the crime had taken place in the car. Therefore, it was decided to examine the victim's car once again. After the specialists removed the seat covers and fabric, a bloodstain belonging to the disappeared Carrie Farver was found. How did Liz manage to poison messages on Carrie's behalf and yet remain above suspicion? Some sources claim that Liz Golar led a double life, dating both Dave and a man named Garrett. The latter lived on an IP address that was identified as the starting point of messages coming from Carrie's name. In the course of communicating with him, it was revealed that he had been dating Shanna Golar, whom many knew as Liz, for a long time. Out of kindness, the man offered Shanna to move in with his children after the fire. However, the relationship between the two was complicated and deteriorated markedly after they began living together. Garrett would look after Golar's children while she secluded herself in her room or went somewhere else. It came as a big revelation to the man what police told him. Golar spent 40 to 50 hours a week pretending to be the missing woman. Her room was a mess, but no significant evidence was found. However, investigators did find several cell phones and electronics in the last apartment she occupied. In late December 2016, Shanna Golar was charged with first-degree murder. The county prosecutor spoke about the complexity of the court investigation. Most murders are dark. This crime was bizarre to the point where it would take some convincing to make someone believe it actually happened. There's no way someone would have let their dog die in a fire they set themselves. There's no way someone would have shot themselves in the thigh, yet Shanna Golar did it in order to deflect suspicion from herself. Shanna Golar's attorney, James Martin Davis, hoped the case would fall apart because it relied mostly on circumstantial evidence. Carrie's body was never found, nor was the crime weapon, and Golar herself never confessed. There was no evidence that Carrie had died at all. The defense team opted for a mistrial, meaning that the degree of Shanna's guilt would be determined by a judge, not a jury. Mountains of complex electronic evidence were presented along with physical evidence. However, the prosecution insisted that the amount of blood found on the passenger seat of Carrie's car was consistent with a confession of stabbing from the IP address where Shanna lived. Investigators did establish Shanna's direct link to Carrie's murder by analyzing the memory card she was using around the time Carrie went missing. It was in a tablet that was stored in Dave's possession. Deleted images were recovered, including a photo of a human foot with a Chinese symbol tattooed on it. It was immediately obvious that the foot belonged to a man who had been dead for many years. In addition, among Carrie's special features was a similar tattoo. Later, the woman's mother confirmed that the tattoo really belongs to her daughter. The photo confirmed Shanna Golar's conviction. The judge found her guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He said, "Carrie Farver did not disappear voluntarily. It is very unfortunate that she was murdered." Authorities believe Shanna killed Carrie, gave her body time to decompose, and then burned the remains to get rid of all evidence. Probably overstepping her bounds due to jealousy, she decided to get rid of her rival. After disposing of her, she purposely took her cell phone to make Farver look crazy and win back Dave's favor. When her plan succeeded, Shanna wanted to rid her lover of Amy as well. But she got so caught up in the game that she ended up falling into a trap of her own making. It's a bloody love square, to say the least. Golar was also found guilty of setting fire to her own home in August 2013, which she tried so hard to blame on Carrie. Because the fire not only burned down the house but also killed pets, she received an additional 20 years in prison. The woman is currently incarcerated at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women. Shanna still maintains her innocence. Dave admitted that he has received thousands of emails and text messages signed by Carrie over the years. However, he never noticed her stalking him when they were together, which cannot be said for Shanna. He also added, "I want her to leave and not do this to anyone else." Justice has been served. For a long time, Carrie Farver's name was on everyone's lips. She was innocently accused of stalking people as well as burning Shanna's house down. Now Carrie herself has been recognized as a victim, and her good name has been restored. Carrie's mother wanted her daughter to be remembered as the fun, smart, talented woman she was. So what became of Carrie's son, Maxwell Farver of Macedonia? According to his LinkedIn page profile, he followed in his mother's footsteps by becoming a computer programmer. He graduated from the University of Iowa with a degree in software engineering, data science, and got married. It's unlikely he was able to forget what happened, but he may have found peace in the family he created. Because of his past, Dave Krupa has now chosen to live away from the limelight. In fact, he doesn't even have a public account on any social media platform. The chilling crime story is a brutal reminder of the tangled complexities that can arise in human relationships, of all kinds of manipulation, sometimes going to extremes just to maintain control of the situation. It is a story about how defenseless we can be in our familiar surroundings without knowing the true nature of human beings. You've probably heard more than once about the search for someone who has vanished without a trace. We all, in one way or another, encounter this phenomenon in everyday life. Missing person notices are commonly seen on the streets, broadcasted on TV or radio, and posted on social media. Those missing can be of various age groups, genders, social statuses, and nationalities. Most often, it's the elderly who are being searched for. Unfortunately, senile dementia and other mental disorders in older people can lead to confusion. As a result, they wander off in unknown directions. Children are the most vulnerable population. In most cases, their disappearances are due to abductions. But what about young people? Those who, it seems, shouldn't just disappear. They are healthy and rational. Often, the reasons for their sudden disappearances are violent acts committed against them. Sometimes, to conceal a crime and avoid accountability, hiding a body becomes a simpler solution. There's a legal maxim that goes, "No body, no crime." However, this is with the slight caveat that the guilt of the accused or the defendant isn't confirmed by a totality of other evidence. Strange events. A complex story unfolded in the family of Graciella Garcia from Hermiston, Oregon, USA. The renowned 49-year-old beauty salon owner disappeared on November 8, 2019. That evening, she planned to have dinner with her 14-year-old son, Jacob, who was at his father's house. Imagine the teenager's surprise when, around 7 p.m., instead of his mother, his stepfather, Romero, appeared at the doorstep, delivering food. Typically, the man wasn't known for his care and attention. He didn't make efforts to connect with the boy, even though they lived in the same house. Nonetheless, Jacob didn't suspect anything wrong. The stepfather explained that Graciella had fallen asleep, so he came instead. After they said goodbye, the boy went to his room and checked his phone. There were 2 missed calls and a text from his mom. When he tried to call her back, he reached her voicemail. Jacob was very worried that his mother didn't respond. It was a bad sign because she was always reachable, especially since they had planned to meet. After a short while, the boy decided to tell his older brother and sisters about the situation. That evening, none of them could get through to her. Everyone thought that the mother had indeed gone to bed early and would get in touch the next day. However, the family was also concerned that her phone was unavailable to clients as it served as a link between them and Graciella. Later, the younger daughter Gabby often recalled a strange conversation with her mother. Initially happy about the meeting, the woman became sad and thoughtful. Then, she seriously informed that the children should know where she kept important documents and money, just in case. Graciella seemed to be worried about something. She showed the safe and shared the PIN code. She also added that the money and the house deed belonged to them, which couldn't be said about her current husband, Cuauhtemoc Romero Sanchez. Gabby was frightened by the conversation. Her mother was healthy and relatively young. She asked her mother what prompted this talk. However, Graciella didn't elaborate. "No one ever knows what the future holds," she mysteriously replied. They never returned to that topic. Surprisingly, over time, the woman's words became prophetic. Gabby often wondered if her mother could have anticipated the tragedy, or if her disappearance was just an unfortunate coincidence. Graciella's journey. Graciella Garcia was born on October 6, 1970 in Mexico. Her family was among the working class. Seeking a better future for their children, her parents decided to emigrate to the USA, where they eventually settled in Hermiston, Oregon. At the time of the move, Graciella was still very young, so she didn't remember the hardships of changing her place of residence. She graduated from Umatilla High School, which primarily catered to low-income populations. All students there received free lunches and breakfasts. With 66% of the students being Hispanic, Graciella easily found friends among them. Her sociability and natural charm distinguished her. Later, she enrolled in Blue Mountain College in the business department. From childhood, she dreamed of connecting her life with the art of hairdressing, and even better, opening her own beauty salon. Graciella was determined and hardworking. Therefore, she sincerely believed that with the right approach, her plans could be realized. By February 2006, she became the owner of Carrie's Beauty Salon. Thanks to her talent and charisma, she soon became well known in society. Moreover, the salon's owner always looked well-groomed, which only contributed to the establishment's image. She loved her job and had a great understanding of new beauty trends. Therefore, there was no shortage of clients. Over time, some of them became Graciella's friends and were welcome at her home. In general, her name was well regarded among the townspeople. Besides her career success, her personal life was also interesting and full of happy events. Beloved men. In her youth, she met a man with whom she fell deeply in love. He was her first love. From him, Graciella had daughters Annabelle and Gabriella, often simply called Gabby. The couple didn't stay together long. The man left the family. Apparently, his feelings for the woman changed over time. Left as a single mother, she didn't despair but focused on self-improvement and earned a degree in cosmetology. Later, fate brought her together with a man of Mexican descent. He was a kind soul, and Graciella liked him very much. She eventually married him. According to the children, she never regretted this decision. He was attentive not only to her, but also to her children, accepting them as his own. Later, the family was blessed with sons, Arthur and Jacob. Nonetheless, the man still called Annabelle and Gabriella his girls. Gabby recalled considering her stepfather her real father, as he always supported, protected, and cared for them. The couple did everything to ensure their family was united and happy. Raising 4 children didn't distract Graciella from her passion. On the contrary, whenever she went to professional meetings, she took them with her. The family always traveled together, which became a lovely tradition for everyone. Thanks to this, they visited many cities, got acquainted with local attractions and cultural features. Moreover, they didn't forget about their roots, often visiting Mexico. It was a good time for the Garcia family. Everyone tried their best to make the others happy. Unfortunately, after 17 years, the couple separated. The man and woman didn't want to torment each other with cooled feelings. They cherished the respectful relationship that had developed over many years. After the divorce, their interaction remained warm and strong. The father was always in touch with the children and saw them regularly. Graciella shared custody of their youngest son with her ex-husband. The other children were adults and lived separately from their parents. However, they always maintained constant contact with the family, celebrated holidays together, and often consulted with each other. Graciella went through the divorce calmly, not losing her optimism and faith in herself, thanks in large part to her ex-husband. Even during such a difficult period in life, the man behaved honorably and understandingly. Her beauty salon operated as usual, and she dedicated all her free time and energy to its development. Graciella immersed herself in her favorite work, taking a break only on Sundays. She spent this day surrounded by family and close friends. The unexpected visit. On the morning of November 9th, 2019, Romero stopped by Annabelle's, Graciella's eldest daughter. She was surprised by the unexpected visit from her mother's new husband. The man told her about his wife's disappearance. According to him, after meeting with Jacob the previous night, he returned home and lay down next to his sleeping wife. But in the morning, he found she wasn't there. After checking the house, he realized that she had gone somewhere. Romero tried calling and texting Graciella, but she didn't respond. He also explained that he visited Annabelle, hoping she might know something. However, the daughter had no such information. Moreover, she was shocked by Romero's words and his reaction to the situation. He was crying and seemed genuinely distressed. It was odd for her to see him this way. as he had never shown any emotions around them, except, perhaps, indifference. Romero also mentioned that Graciella had been acting strangely lately. He even suggested that she might have found someone else. He didn't deny that his wife might have needed a break from their relationship. In general, he wasn't sure she was genuinely happy with him and considered any reason for her disappearance. Annabelle found the man's words insincere and his tears theatrical. Moreover, she indeed started to worry about her mother as she found his behavior suspicious. Romero had always avoided communication with his wife's children, and suddenly, for some reason, he decided to turn to them. After Romero left, the girl decided to inform the rest of the family about what had happened. Where did the homeowner go? Graciella's children gathered around her house, determined to finally find out what was happening. Her car was parked on the driveway. If she had decided to leave Romero, she surely would have done so in her car. The second thing that caught their eye was the perfect order in their mother's house. Everything was so tidy that it looked overly perfect. Mrs. Garcia loved creative chaos. If she was going somewhere, her belongings and accessories would be scattered all over the room. She would spend a long time in front of the mirror, choosing an outfit for the new day. She loved her jewelry, yet at first glance, she left all her precious items at home. Graciella didn't even wear her favorite rings and necklaces, which she wore every day, not to mention other personal items. Everyone was concerned about what could make their mother step out in such a state. Their imagination painted terrifying pictures, one of which was fleeing. While going around the house, Gabby found something strange. A large blanket was lying in the washing machine. This could not but catch her attention, as their mother always taught them not to overload the appliances. The blanket was clearly heavy and someone else had washed it. Apparently, Romero himself. It was unlikely he would engage in household chores. Usually, Graciella took care of the house. Then what could this mean? Definitely that he was trying to hide something. However, the man did not comment on this in any way, citing that he does not pay attention to such details. Later, it was established that along with the homeowner, the following items disappeared from the house: passport, driver's license, and mobile phone. On November 11th, Annabelle contacted law enforcement. Visiting the police station, she was surprised. It turns out, Romero had not informed the police about his wife's disappearance, even though he knew about it since the 9th, or perhaps earlier. Thus, Graciella's eldest daughter was the first to file a missing person report for her mother. The distant personality. So, who was Romero, and why didn't Graciella's family warm up to him? She met him a while after her divorce. Cuauhtémoc Romero Sanchez was one of her beauty salon's clients. Initially, their interaction was based on friendship. Later, the man took the bold step of asking the beautiful and successful woman out. Mrs. Garcia accepted his invitation, and before she knew it, their relationship evolved into something more. When she introduced him to her family, they noted his excessive aloofness and cold demeanor. Annabelle and Gabby shared that they tried multiple times to connect with him, but Romero did not reciprocate. Graciella's children were puzzled by such behavior, but attributed it to individual personality differences, especially compared to their mother's past relationships. They genuinely wanted to understand her partner and the motives driving him. Sometimes he appeared odd and unsociable to them. They couldn't grasp how such a vibrant and joyous woman could fall for someone so dry. Nonetheless, they respected her choice. When their mother announced her upcoming marriage, everyone supported her and shared in the joy of the occasion, especially the girls, because they wanted to see her happy and loved. Romero's arrogance and restraint were noted even by guests on the wedding day. Some even thought he was overly jealous, as he monopolized the bride's attention. When Graciella's young grandchildren came to congratulate the newlyweds, Sanchez treated them with disdain rather than affection and tenderness. It was clear he didn't want to share his wife with anyone, even her family. After that, Graciella's relatives found it hard to conceal their true feelings about the man. Annabelle even openly stated she did not consider him a stepfather, let alone a father. All they wanted was to maintain normal relations, as seen in civilized families. After the wedding, the newlyweds moved in together into Graciella's house, along with her youngest son, Jacob. The teenager shared that shortly after, Romero began acting as if he were the sole owner. According to the boy, the honeymoon period was short-lived. Soon, the family idyll began to crumble. He noticed that his mother initially tried to set personal boundaries, but being non-confrontational, quickly gave in. This seemed to suit Romero, who was quick-tempered and never the first to apologize. To avoid creating tension in the family, Graciella conceded to him. Over time, it seemed she realized she had rushed into the marriage. In heart-to-heart conversations, she confessed feeling constrained and oppressed. Her husband controlled her and wouldn't let her go anywhere alone. Yet, she never spoke of wanting to leave the abusive relationship. It appeared Graciella was still in love with him. Everyone began to understand she had tied herself to the wrong man. Moreover, it seemed he was unemployed and living off his wife, as his constant presence at her side was otherwise inexplicable. This greatly frustrated the hard-working Garcia family. Sanchez was a skilled manipulator. He followed her everywhere, monitored her correspondences, and even friendships with her girlfriends were under threat of being disrupted. He either wouldn't let her go, or could unexpectedly show up as if testing Graciella's fidelity. His jealousy was excessive. The heroine became embarrassed by such behavior and ultimately limited her social circle. Her family became the only people she communicated with. This inevitably affected her professional life, as the industry demanded constant contact with clients and attendance at various events. Friends and colleagues noticed that her former cheerfulness had vanished. The always radiant woman now looked sad and worn. It was clear she was unhappy. Her children noticed changes in her mood and appearance. They also observed that she had lost her previous independence. After discussing it among themselves, they once again agreed that they didn't like Romero. However, he was an adult woman's choice, and there was little they could change, especially since they were accustomed to respecting Graciella's decisions. Other relatives also expressed distrust towards the man. At the same time, none of them knew how to help her. The couple's relationship needed professional help, and Gabby once mentioned this to her mother, to which she responded that she would manage her personal life on her own. The noose tightens. In 2018, Graciella announced her decision to relocate her beauty salon to her home, explaining it was more convenient for her. Her family was skeptical about this idea since they had never heard her mention such a plan in the 12 years since the salon's opening. Later, some clients mentioned that Romero often hung around the salon, creating a bit of tension, as if the warm and cozy atmosphere had been lost. Some thought Graciella made this move to solve a problem, but others doubted the idea originated from her, suspecting her jealous husband insisted on the move. Nonetheless, the salon owner continued to express her enthusiasm for the long-awaited changes, noting the home-based work allowed her to be close to Jacob and Romero. By the end of the year, she and her husband were remodeling a room for the salon, but the setup unexpectedly dragged on, completing only in May 2019. Despite the closure, her reputation remained intact, and a rumor of the studio's reopening attracted a queue of clients for months ahead, including new visitors. She was thrilled with her professional success, but became increasingly reticent about her personal life. Another incident raised concerns for her safety. Graciella asked Gabby if she could pick her up. When Gabby said it would take some time as she was far away, her mother insisted, an unusual plea for help that surprised Gabby. Graciella claimed everything was fine, attributing her request to a quarrel with her husband. After meeting, they spent time together, and Graciella appeared to relax, smiling and asking her daughter not to worry, suggesting, "Lovers' quarrels are but lovers' renewals." They parted ways, but Gabby remained uneasy, increasingly worried for her mother. Investigation. After Annabelle contacted the police, the relationship between Graciella's family and her husband deteriorated completely. He seemed angered by their decision to inform law enforcement. Romero presented an official version of his wife's disappearance, claiming she decided to take some time alone or had gone to another man and would soon show up. This was his response to anyone trying to clarify the situation. However, the police report did not go unnoticed. Officers launched an investigation, not ruling out that the missing woman could have been a victim of a crime. They first searched Graciella's home, where relatives confirmed only a few personal items were missing, with nothing else raising suspicion. The investigation included interviews with her children, husband, and others close to the family, including her ex-husband, but nothing substantial was learned. All unanimously expressed doubt about Romero's behavior, though he cooperated with detectives, consenting to a home search, participating in interrogations, providing his DNA, and undergoing a polygraph. With no grounds for his arrest, the investigation continued. Analysis of Graciella's phone records pinpointed the last signal near a bridge in Washington on November 9th at 12:30 p.m., after which the phone was turned off. Her bank accounts remained untouched, as did her social media. Hundreds of witnesses were questioned, and all places Graciella frequented were checked, to no avail. She seemed to have vanished without a trace, a disappearance the investigators deemed suspicious. About 4 months into the investigation, Hermiston police made a public statement, revealing no confirmed information about her last sighting. Despite Romero's failure to report her missing, there was no specific accusation against him. This stance by the authorities frustrated Graciella's relatives. Their communication with law enforcement dwindled. Previously updated weekly, contacts eventually ceased. The missing woman's children had to call the station themselves for case updates. Public engagement. As of March 2020, there were no advancements in the search for Graciella. The situation was further complicated by the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Consequently, her family turned to the media, hoping to draw public attention to their ordeal and solicit assistance in gathering any information. They believed that even minor details could be significant. Gabby mainly communicated with the press, expressing her family's frustration over being in the dark for months and criticizing the police for it. She implored the investigators to devote more attention to finding her mother. The Garcia family suspected foul play in Graciella's disappearance, citing several indicators, particularly the condition of her belongings and the strange situation at home. It was unclear who would take such a drastic step against her, as she had no visible enemies. It was evident she couldn't have left on her own. She would have contacted her family to reassure them. Their lack of communication indicated something terrible had happened. In addition to media coverage, posters and flyers describing the missing 49-year-old Latina woman, approximately 1.6 meters tall and weighing around 62 kilograms, with dyed blonde hair, were distributed throughout the city. Suspect nearby? Graciella's children also requested a change in the detective team handling the case, suspecting bias and collusion with Romero. Somehow, these individuals were acquainted with each other. The family voiced concerns over numerous inconsistencies in the case. It was discovered that Sanchez's phone was turned off on the day of his wife's disappearance, and his behavior did not resemble that of a person alarmed by the sudden vanishing of a loved one. The Garcia family demanded the suspect's arrest. The police chief, Jason Edmiston, promptly responded to these accusations, confirming Mrs. Garcia's disappearance as suspicious and possibly involving foul play, although this was just one hypothesis. He assured the investigation remained impartial, guided by evidence and circumstances, and dismissed any allegations of social connections between Romero and law enforcement as unfounded. Edmiston also mentioned the spread of misinformation hindering the investigation and described the case as ongoing and developing, with certain information necessarily kept confidential. Additionally, authorities sought assistance from the FBI. Edmiston expressed frustration over public criticism of the police's actions without understanding the legal complexities. Meanwhile, Gabby announced a fundraiser to hire a private detective, a move perceived as a critique of the police's handling of the investigation, suggesting their inefficacy. On the first anniversary of Graciella's disappearance, Her family organized a memorial event attended by friends and acquaintances, reminiscing about her vibrant and cheerful nature. They prayed for her safe return and lit candles, later placing signs outside the police station urging the search for Graciella Garcia to continue. The latest update in the case came in September 2023, when a significant incident involving Romero Sanchez made headlines. He was attacked and severely injured, requiring surgery. Speculation suggested that Graciella's brother, Mason Garcia, had shot the missing woman's husband multiple times. However, the media did not disclose the event's specifics or any legal repercussions for Mason. It seemed Graciella's family had grown tired of the police's apparent inaction towards Sanchez, leading one of them to take matters into their own hands, potentially leading to a more frightening conclusion, a tragic conclusion. Currently, the disappearance of Graciella Garcia remains an unsolved mystery, leaving her family in agonizing uncertainty. This state of not knowing is profoundly detrimental to their health and mental well-being. Over time, one might come to terms with loss, but the difficulty of living in limbo is significantly harder. It remains unknown whether Graciella is alive. Her children are left with nothing but to pray that the situation will soon become clear and that those responsible will face justice. Ultimately, no crime is perfect. Sometimes there's just a lack of motive and evidence.